In today's episode of the Pathfind Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Jennifer Harris-Kroll, and she's hailing over from the team at Anthill. And Anthill is an award-winning solution that's there to support employees that don't sit at a desk. So many of you might be wondering, what does it mean? Who's actually, falls into that group, and what does Anthill do for them? And that's what we're going to explore today together with Jennifer. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lucas.
Yeah, of course. So for everybody who hasn't heard about Anthill, maybe give us a 360 overview. What is it all about in your own words?
Well, Anthill is, like you said, it's an award-winning tool. We are currently the only software built from the ground up for what we call the deskless workforce. That is everyone who doesn't work in an office. So if you think about what happened during the pandemic, it was everyone who didn't get to work from home, and they never will because their jobs don't happen in an office. So retail workers, warehousing workers, manufacturing, drivers, it's actually 80% of the global workforce, 2.7 billion people. But the vast majority of software is built for people who work in an office. So what Anthill does is we are basically a 24/7 help desk available to these workers in 110 languages. It's two-way communication, so it's not just one way. And it is all through text messaging. We open up software that companies are already paying for, and just are actually answer about 85% of typical questions that currently might take an HR or ops person hours a day to answer. And we also can, with creepy accuracy, according to our customers, predict turnover. And there's a lot more, but those are basically the big hitters that everyone's looking for at the moment.
Okay, I see. That makes a lot of sense. So, which type of organization is a great fit? Maybe give us a hint on industry. I mean, you pointed to it already a little bit, and I'm sure there's many different use cases. Is there a certain size that requires a certain amount of employees from where it starts to make sense? Maybe give us a bit of a feel. Who's a great customer for Anthill?
We're trying to figure that out right now too. So, although our co-founders started researching and working on Anthill about 8 years ago, we've only been in business since February of 2020, and we have customers right now that range from 50 employees to 500,000 employees. And so, we're trying to figure out that match right now. It seems like it works for everyone, and I kind of liken it to a water bottle. Like everyone uses a water bottle of some kind, but it's a different type, right? Some people it needs to be aluminum and double walled and all that, and other people don't really care. And so we're kind of like that. So we're still in that finding the exact right customer, but so far it seems to be working for everyone, which is not actually a good thing, believe it or not.
It makes it difficult, not easier, at least for a marketer. That is for sure.
So people with deskless workers.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And who within those organizations would you say is a typical champion for Anthill? Is that actually does it come from the HR team? Does it come sort of from bottom up that some of workers bring it in? Is it from the C-suite, top down? Like, how does Anthill typically get introduced?
Right now, internal communications people or those workforce communications peoples are by far our biggest champions because they're tasked with the job of communicating with all the employees. And so that's kind of where our conversations start. It often also comes from higher up in HR because it does help with retention. And that's a big topic of conversation for everyone right now.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. Now, how do these folks learn about Anthill? Like, how do you think about their journey? Or in other words, what are the client acquisition channels that you guys leverage for those folks to learn about Anthill?
We're lucky. We have a couple of very qualified researchers on our team, so we definitely go that thought leadership route and are able to use that to our advantage. We also have a ton of data. We talk to thousands of employees every day, so we do have a lot to share. But we also are doing all the basics. So in-person conferences is by far and away the best ROI for us right now, because we're creating a category and it's a little bit of an education process. Being in person is very, very helpful to us, but we are also, so I would say that, but we're also doing everything else, all the outbound cold outreach, everything we can think of.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I mean, you just mentioned actually that you're building a category, which obviously puts an extra educational effort mixed into all of the channels that you guys are using. That makes a lot of sense. And if we actually talk about the website, because obviously that education might happen specifically if they're not talking to anybody personally, education might happen on the website. How do you think about the page? Like, what role does Anthill.co or .co play, you think, in their journey?
Well, we are on our third iteration of a website right now, and this weekend I'm going to be launching our fourth iteration of a website, and we have another one already in the works for later this fall. So I think that as we find that way to explain the product to people, it has evolved. I think that we have tried to use very obvious descriptions in humorous ways so as not to make people feel like, you should have known this already, but more like, this is a very obvious thing that's in front of everyone, and how did no one think of this already? Like everyone should be going, oh, in a funny way, right? And so I think that the actual journey is still in development, but what we try to do first and foremost is offer value, and help educate or train or offer something to people, whether they use our product or not, whether they stay on the website very long or not. So that's kind of like our first layer, and we're still there at the moment.
You mentioned something actually very interesting. If you have a product that is not necessarily the conceptual level known to the visitor of the website, there's a lot of explanation need to be done. You mentioned humor as one tool. What else have you learned over, working on those iterations of the website? What do you personally perceive as very important when positioning a message which you cannot really rely on that they fully know already what this is all about when they come to the page?
Yeah, it's really hard when you don't have that, that it's kind of like X, like what is a brat? It's kind of like a hot dog, but different, like you can't really say that to someone. And so we have found that graphics are incredibly important for that, for people to be able to see. It also, because people don't have a huge attention span, graphics and motion graphics are really important. So quick shareable things. And also hitting them with statistics about, I don't mean hitting them, but what can we do for you? What have we done so far? For example, we have a 98% subscription rate. Compared to an app, that is outrageous and huge, an 85% weekly user rate. So for people who are trying to communicate and reach this kind of workforce, those are huge numbers that they know then will make their job easier. So just trying to visually get those things across immediately is probably the thing we've learned works best at the moment.
And that's very cool. And I think it's very helpful actually because I think a lot of marketers, specifically on new products, are in that shoes. It's a fine line between describing value, but not going in, because if you just describe value, they don't know what it actually is. Like it's super, super interesting. Okay, cool. No, appreciate that. Is there any tools, any methods, any approaches you'd say in general to just win, more of your website visitors over that you picked up over the years that you think are a helpful way for you to, get results from the pages?
It seems like things have changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. And so I think it's become increasingly more difficult to grab people's attention and get them to get the information they need, and make that next step, take that next action. And I think, frankly, I spent some time at SHRM, that's the Society for Human Resource Management. And I know from that research that our members were very overwhelmed. Just, the whole HR group is very overwhelmed with offers and emails and inundated with information. And so I think it's very difficult to break through that noise. So that's where graphics come in. That's where those kinds of things come in. So, but as far as tools go, I think that's changed. And I think now there are, there are products like PathMonk, for example, that help companies figure this out, because I think it's very hard to know what is actually working. And not all customers are willing to, or have time to talk to you and tell you everything. So you can't even depend on them. That's putting kind of the workload on them. So I think utilizing tools like PathMonk and others are important to kind of gain those insights. Sure. But I have a good answer.
No, but I think what you're pointing to, the problem is very, very relevant, which is the information and the overload of information. Actually, that leads me to my next question. As a marketer per se, if you want to educate yourself, as a growth leader, there's so much content you could consume and learn from. what have you figured for yourself personally? What are the places where you like to read? Sort of, how do you sort of find your way through all the noise out there?
You know, I think that I am not abnormal in that I have a whole lot of things saved to read later
Yeah.
that seemed very compelling at the time, and now I couldn't even tell you what's on that list.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, I know at least for us, because we're in this hyper growth phase, like just keeping up is very difficult. So it's what's in the moment, you know. So I do keep a lot of bookmarks of things that I think might be relevant at some point and go through that regularly, but it is really hard. I mean, I often feel overwhelmed and often take a day or a weekend and just turn my phone off and try to just focus. I think it's just a global problem right now, being able to focus. So I'm sorry, I don't have a really great answer,
No, but
except
I
to
think
just be,
makes sense.
just have boundaries, you know, around what, and find those good sources of truth or sources that kind of click with what you're trying to do, and just focus on that. Because if you Google something right now, so many things come up that are probably wonderful, which, you know, as a marketer is disheartening, because you got a lot of people out there are creating good things and they don't get consumed because people are overwhelmed.
That's a very authentic answer, I should say. Yeah, as we slowly actually moving towards the end of the interview, to keep the interview short and in line with human attention
Sorry.
span somehow. All good, all good. Jumping into the rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
I am.
What is the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to?
So last podcast would be Huberman Lab.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more really focused on health right now. And I just reread Atomic Habits.
Mm-hmm.
And a little book called The Art of Happiness.
What's one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Wow, keeping up. I think education, probably getting
Mm-hmm.
the word out there and educating people about what we do and the importance of it
If
and
there
how it
would
can affect
be,
the bottom line.
okay, good.
Sorry, just how it can affect the bottom line.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, what's the one thing that you would fix for your role as a marketer today?
I would make sure that every deskless worker knew that we existed, so they would have hope.
Mm-hmm. And if today would be your very first day, right? I mean, you've been in very interesting roles. You've been a founder a couple of times, you're project manager, a scrum master. You've been doing a ton of different things. If we go back a couple of years, let's say we go back to Cornell University, right? You're in formal education. Now you're off into the world of business and growth. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
Always move towards fear.
Oh. Would you mind to expand a little bit? I know it's a short, but it's a very interesting
I
answer.
think that people don't do things because of fear. And I think when you feel, I think that you miss out on opportunities. And I think that that's those are the moments of growth. And so when I have a choice to make between two things, I always pick the scariest option. And that's something that I've learned the hard way. And so I would say always move towards that scary thing that seems like a crazy idea or out of your realm of knowledge or whatever is that stretch item. Like, don't walk in front of a bus. I don't mean that. I mean, when you have an option to choose, just don't when you feel that scary feeling, just move towards it, make friends with it.
Maybe one small follow-up, because I think it's such a fantastic answer. How did you learn to detect if it's, because sometimes you could get yourself a lot of rational reasons why you don't do something, which is actually underneath there is a little fear hiding. Any pointers for people how they can identify that easily? If not, it's okay. I know I'm pushing the boundaries here a little bit.
No, that's fine. So for me, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it was about getting quiet and really learning what was actually trying, your brain and your body are trying to keep you safe, right? That's so staying in your lane and staying comfortable is what keeps you safe. So really getting quiet, a lot of journaling, meditating, and figuring out when was my gut actually saying, no, this is the way. And also trial and error. Although it's never let me down. Moving towards fear, I'm able to make rapid decisions, and it so far in the last 4 or 5 years hasn't been wrong.
Cool. Jennifer, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all about Anthill that we discussed, what's the one thing that they should remember?
Oh, wow. The one thing that they should remember, Anthill opens a pathway to your deskless workers.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thanks, Lucas.